We are talking E.T.n, the extraterrestrial nasty. No, this is not a joke. This is a real film. But I am cheating a little bit. So this is actually the British title for the movie Night Fright. Not to be confused with Fright Night, however. So Night Fright is a 1967 movie along the lines of Robot Monster or the Giant Killer Monster, but was repackaged and released on VHS in the UK under E.T.n. And I actually had the VHS of this, but I bought it thinking, wow, that looks cool, and was thoroughly disappointed when I watched it. There you go, but that was obviously the aim. An early mockbuster, you might say. So, this movie originally made as Night Fright, and it's one of these kind of like low-budget, schlocky, silly kind of monster on the loose movies. So it focuses on this kind of small American town. There's been some type of crash from a spacecraft. The government have kind of cordoned it off, and at the same time there seems to be a vicious killing where people have been mauled to death ultimately. So we've got the a group of local kind of teenagers played by 40-year-olds and a kind of the police trying to track down what's happened, and of course they run across this large creature which is effectively a guy in a gorilla suit with a plastic mask. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what works in this movie. Well, the title that it was released in the UK, I think, was definitely fun. Not at all like the movie that it kind of pretends to be. And, yeah, it's not even, I mean, make it sound like it's going to be this kind of gory, nasty film. It isn't. It isn't anything like that. But, yeah, good marketing, I would say. But the actual film itself, let's talk about what does work with that. I think there is a fun science fiction idea. Effectively, the creature is not actually an alien. It's an experiment where the government sent animals into space to see how kind of space radiation would affect them. And this kind of ship has gone missing for 6 months and has now crash landed and has mutated primarily into this kind of creature. Now, there's talk of other mutations, but this is all that we see. But I thought that was quite a fun idea, and you have to bear in mind the kind of time frame here, 1967. So it was actually a fun, sort of schlocky idea, I think, to kind of like base a kind of science fiction movie of. So is there anything else I can say that works in this movie? I mean, it's very much a standard kind of like template movie where you have, you know, creatures running around the woods, or a creature, you know, attacking people. And it's a kind of tried and tested formula that worked well in the 50s and 60s. And this is no different. So it's very much what you are going to expect. You know, there's some kind of like, a couple of kind of fun sort of characters. I think some of the kind of the police characters, you know, are reasonably kind of quite fun. And it's one of these films, admittedly, and I don't really like doing ironic reviews, to be honest, but because obviously the movie is somewhat dated now, I mean, it feels like it's almost a parody when you're watching it these days, because, you know, we have these people who are clearly a lot older than teenagers, acting like teenagers and things like this, and it's kind of funny, to be honest with you, but obviously it wasn't its intention. So yeah, I mean, the creature looks quite big, I would suggest, but it's kind of, you're scraping the barrel with this one to say genuinely good things about it. Like I said, it's kind of typical to a point of a very low budget Z grade movie of that time. So we, you know, again, when we're looking at it in a critical sense, we do have to bear that in mind. But one of the things I think is that is sort of on the negative side is that it is just very much a forgettable kind of throwaway film with a very, very slight plot. And let's not kid ourselves. There were movies that came out around this time and before that had, you know, more kind of like interesting kind of narratives, even B movies, you know. Invaders from Mars was a great movie, I used to think. That was one of my favourite kind of like science fiction movies when I grew up. So it can be done, you know. But again, this is a cheap, quickly produced movie. The plot though is so thin. I mean, it almost feels like it's, you know, the movie's movie length, but the actual kind of plot itself you could fit into the first act of the movie. There's so little that happens, and that's probably the main problem here. Is that it ultimately is kind of dull. We really don't see a lot of the monster. When we do, it's lit terribly. It's a very dimly lit film, so we barely see it, possibly because they're trying to hide the suit necessarily, but it looks kind of like you're watching it with a sack over your head sometimes. It's very, very dim. And then the actual kind of, the bulk of the story is just kind of like these characters talking, and they're so stiff and cliched. You know, again, especially these like air quotes teenagers, it's just kind of like even a little bit cringy. I mean, they have literally, there's probably about, in total of the film, there's probably about 10 minutes of footage of these air quote teenagers dancing to some sort of like nondescript public domain kind of like 60s kind of style music in the forest, and that is it. You know, yeah, great, they're kind of like mincing about and all that, but that's probably about 10 minutes of footage in the actual film, kind of cut over a few different kind of like instances of the movie. So it's not a lot going on. Then we have kind of like very similar kind of conversations. There's one policeman talking to another policeman. Then we have that other policeman talking to another policeman saying kind of the same kind of thing. You know, plot points kind of get repeated and repeated and repeated. The creature itself, obviously, you know, as I've said, is effectively a gorilla suit with kind of a plastic headpiece. I mean, this is a 1967 film, and I think you can forgive this in the sort of maybe like the 50s, but this is, you know, this is a good time after that. And I think, you know, it is not good for its time. And let's not kid ourselves. Yes, it's an older film by comparative now, but for its time, I think it was kind of quite poor. I mean, the acting isn't brilliant, but you know, again, the kind of the casting here is, I mean, that was sort of typical of those sort of times, in fairness, but you know, it's just not a good film. It's not interesting. The creature is kind of, as I say, very kind of quickly put together, and yeah, it's just a boring film, unfortunately. I mean, like I said, there's a couple of ideas here. There's a couple of kind of dialogue sequences with the kind of like the police and stuff, which I thought was okay. But it's, you know, you're scraping the barrel. You're watching this one because it's got a fun title, or at least a fun alternative title. And that's it. It hooked me in when I saw this in the video shop. I think I'm watching that, and boy, was I disappointed. But anyway, for me, this is a 3 out of 10. It's not a good film, but it wasn't a good film in the 60s, and it still isn't. So, yeah, have you seen this one? Please do let me know, and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.